Admiral Minute Kim stood motionless near the edge of the massive council hall, her dark military uniform starkly contrasting the flowing diplomatic robes worn by the rest of Earth's delegation. The room was beyond anything Earth's architecture could rival miles high, walls embedded with living light that pulsed in patterns no human artist could replicate. Above and around her, thousands of alien delegates filled the tiered chamber, whispering in countless languages, observing her people like a curiosity or a threat. She didn't care about the architecture. Not anymore. At the center of the chamber stood Foreign Secretary Daniel June. His voice, amplified and translated into over 400 dialects, echoed across the hall. "Esteemed council members," June began, steady but strained, "humanity has overcome its violent past. We have united our planet, ended our internal wars, stabilized our climate. We do not seek dominance. We seek only to contribute, to learn and grow alongside the galactic community." Kim watched the council closely, especially the 6 primary counselors, the ruling heads of the founding species. She didn't need a translator. She could read posture, expression, silence. And after 3 decades of military service, she could tell when a decision had already been made. The Daxian counselor, a tall, 4-armed being with skin like obsidian glass, raised one hand, halting June's plea. Its voice came through the translator unit, cold and devoid of tone. "We have reviewed Earth's history in its entirety," the Daxian announced. "No species in recorded council history has spent as much of its development period in warfare as yours. Your entertainment glorifies violence. Your economies were built on conquest. Your greatest technological leaps weaponized." "We've changed," June interrupted, not pleading, but desperate. "We're not the same humanity we were even a century ago." The insectoid Krell counselor twitched an antenna, her speaker activated without further prompt. "The risk assessment is conclusive. Humanity evolved through aggressive competition, not cooperative symbiosis. You are, by nature, destabilizing to galactic peace." Kim's jaw tensed. The council hadn't come to hear them. It had come to deliver a sentence. Dr. Hane Park, Earth's top scientific advisor, stepped forward, calm despite the pressure. "Our competitive drive has also driven innovation. Our breakthroughs in medicine, physics, and material sciences, these could benefit all council species." A lone hum echoed as the Mithran counselor, a gaseous entity contained within a floating crystalline sphere, pulsed with shifting light. "Cooperative species develop such technologies without corresponding threat. We have seen your kind before. Those granted early access to interstellar systems often expand violently within a single generation." "They're afraid of us," Lieutenant Noah Choi whispered at Kim's side. "Young but sharp." "Yes," Kim replied softly, "and fear doesn't create allies. It creates enemies." The 6 primary counselors retreated into silent, encrypted frequency for nearly 5 minutes. Kim could feel the tension rising across the human delegation. She noticed the subtle shifts among the alien representatives, the ones who pitied them, and the ones who watched them with weary detachment. They'd been watching Earth's transmissions for decades. They knew more about humanity than humanity had known about them. Finally, the central counselor, a metallic being whose liquid metal form shifted subtly with each breath, floated forward. "The decision is unanimous," it said. "Earth is hereby classified as a Category 3 civilization, technologically advanced, but culturally incompatible with galactic norms. Your species will be permitted to exist within its own star system only. A quarantine boundary will be established beyond the orbit of your outermost planet. Reaching this boundary will be treated as an act of aggression." A murmur swept through the chamber. Secretary June leaned against the podium, pale. "How long will this quarantine last?" The metallic being flickered, then responded. "Until your species demonstrates a fundamental evolutionary shift away from aggression. Based on historical models, no less than 50,000 of your years." The silence in the Earth delegation was almost physical. 50,000 years. Longer than human civilization had existed. a de facto death sentence for any hope of joining the stars. Dr. Park stepped forward again. We request the right to submit further evidence, a formal appeal. The decision is final, the Krell interrupted flatly. You will return to Earth. Limited assistance will be provided for resource stabilization, but no faster than light technology, no weapons development, no unrestricted communication with outside species. Kim watched her colleagues crumble, one by one, dreams extinguished mid-breath. Secretary June gave one final weary bow. We regret that you have judged us by our past, he said, voice barely above a whisper, and not by our potential. But Earth will comply with your decision. We still hope that future contact may lead to a different conclusion. The session ended in cold finality. Security drones hovered into place, guiding the Earth delegation toward the exit. Kim walked beside Choi, her boots silent against the smooth foreign surface. They're making a mistake, Choi whispered. A big one. Yes, Kim said, voice steady, eyes hard. They fear our aggression. But by trying to cage us, they've ensured it. They walked through the glittering corridors of the Council's orbital station, past technologies far beyond anything Earth had ever imagined: shields, propulsion systems, atmospheric control interfaces, life support ecosystems unlike anything in human design. Kim memorized everything she saw. One day, it might matter. Back aboard the human diplomatic cruiser, the mood was silent, somber. Secretary June collapsed into his seat in the main conference room, years older than when they'd arrived. But Kim didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table and locked eyes with each person in the room. They called us animals, she said. Too dangerous to be trusted. They placed a fence around our sky, but they made a mistake. They left us alone. Dr. Park frowned. A fence patrolled by ships thousands of years ahead of ours. For now, Kim said. But they've shown us what's possible. They've given us something more valuable than permission motivation. And most importantly, they've shown us who they are, species that evolved through cooperation. Not competition. That makes them vulnerable. And it gives us an advantage. Lieutenant Choi looked up, realization dawning. You're saying, we don't break the fence? No, Kim said. Not directly. But they've given us a common enemy. And nothing unites humanity faster than that. As Earth appeared in the viewport, a blue jewel imprisoned by invisible walls, Admiral Kim stood unmoving, her hands behind her back. The Council had feared that aggression lived too deep in the human soul. Soon, they'd learn just how right they were. 20 years had passed since Earth was quarantined, cut off from the stars by the will of an alien council that claimed to fear what humanity might become. They were right to be afraid. From the moment the delegation returned home, reeling from humiliation and loss, the wheels of change began to turn. Not in the halls of diplomats or among the scattered heads of state, but deep within the Defense Command bunker buried beneath the Pacific Ocean, where Admiral Minute Kim addressed a room full of silent, grim-faced leaders. We were given two options, Kim said, her voice even. Extinction by isolation or surrender of our future. I don't intend to choose either. The world was still catching its breath. At first, there were protests against the Council, against Earth's failure to integrate, against the perceived shame. But those flames didn't last, because beneath the outrage was a truth no one wanted to say aloud. Earth had been judged, not unfairly, but accurately. The Council saw what humanity truly was: a species forged in conflict, defined by its will to survive and dominate. And now that same instinct was turning inward, towards survival. Within 6 months of the exile, old rivalries dissolved. Treaties were signed that would have been impossible just a decade before. National borders became administrative regions. Military organizations merged into a single unified command structure. For the first time in human history, Earth was speaking with one voice, not because of idealism, but because it had no choice. The newly formed Earth Strategic Defense Command under Kim's leadership quietly launched Project Prometheus, a massive classified research initiative focused on one goal: escape, not through diplomacy, through science. It was headquartered beneath the Nevada desert, in a complex so deep that no satellite could detect it. The first years were bleak. The only references to alien technology came from the brief, highly controlled visit to the Galactic Council station. The delegation had returned with nothing but sensor data, environmental samples, and fragmented images, snapshots of faster-than-light propulsion, crystalline power matrices, and exotic matter manipulation. Not enough to copy, but enough to start guessing. Dr. Haniel Park, lead physicist and former head of Korea's fusion program, had been chosen to direct the initiative. When asked how long it would take, his answer was simple. If you want a miracle, give me 20 years. Kim gave him everything. The defense budget tripled. Military spending was redirected almost entirely to R&D, energy, computation, materials science. Every discipline was co-opted into the Prometheus network. Nearly every major university on Earth quietly funneled its best talent into the program. Failures piled high. But so did data. In the 10th year, the first breakthrough came. It was called Operation Stardust, a covert mission to bypass the quarantine without triggering the Council's surveillance systems. Thousands of microprobes, disguised as interplanetary debris, were launched in randomized patterns from dozens of points around the solar system. Most were destroyed, but enough made it past the barrier to start transmitting. Their job wasn't to explore, it was to listen. And what they heard changed everything. Everything's slower than we expected, Park explained during a closed-door session with Kim and her command staff. They're not as omniscient as they appear. The Council monitors fixed transit lanes, major systems, but their surveillance outside known trade routes, sparse, patchy, predictable. It was the opening Earth needed. Now, in the 20th year, the Prometheus facility hummed like a living machine. Thousands of scientists rotated through shifts that never stopped. Day and night were irrelevant this deep underground. Above them, the stars stretched across the Nevada sky, silent, unreachable, but not for much longer. In a high-security lab, Dr. Park stood over a shimmering holographic simulation of what looked like a ring of twisted space. The surrounding technicians held their breath as numbers scrolled across a dozen screens. Stabilizer field up 8%, he instructed. The image shifted, tightened until it formed a near-perfect torus, a hole in reality itself. Park stared, unblinking. "It's holding," an assistant whispered. 93% integrity, stable. Park exhaled slowly. "Record everything. Prep the chamber. We test the physical model tomorrow." Across the world, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Kim sat in her war room surrounded by a dozen high-ranking officers. When the message came, 3 simple words, "It works." Confirmed, Kim closed her eyes, let herself feel something she hadn't in years. Relief. "Initiate Phase 2, she ordered. Within hours, the Prometheus facility was linked via secure quantum relays to the Pacific Command Bunker. On the central screen, the prototype FTL device stood at the center of a reinforced chamber, surrounded by magnetic dampeners and radiation shields. "The theory is elegant," Park explained to Earth's senior leadership. "We're not matching Council technology. Not yet, but we don't have to. We found another way, folding space, briefly, at a single point, creating an artificial tunnel between 2 fixed coordinates. And in practice?" Kim asked. "We'll find out in 5 minutes." The room fell silent as the countdown began. The test subject, a small, unmanned probe, was armed with sensors, a tracking beacon, and a shield matrix. "Energizing," a technician announced. The ring flared to life. Light bent inward. Space rippled, and with a flash that overloaded 3 cameras, the probe disappeared. Silence. Then shouts. "Signal acquired," a communications officer shouted, transmitting from beyond Neptune's orbit. "Confirmed, jump success." Cheers erupted. Park simply closed his eyes, overwhelmed. 20 years of work had led to this. "How soon to scale it up for a manned vessel?" Kim asked. 6 months for a prototype. A year to field deployable ships." "You have 6, she said. "No more." It was the moment everything changed. Construction began immediately in secret facilities beneath the lunar surface. Using a hybrid of salvaged alien materials and Earth-based composites, the SVF Prometheus, the first hyperspace-capable human ship, was built in silence, far from prying eyes. Admiral Kim, now nearing 70, insisted on commanding the maiden voyage herself. The mission was surgical: slip past the quarantine, establish a hidden base in a resource-rich but unpatrolled system, return undetected. 12 light-years from Earth, among a belt of unclaimed asteroids, they laid the foundation of humanity's first off-world colony. Mining, manufacturing, and FDL drive refinement began immediately. It was called Operation Exodus, and it had just begun. By the time they returned, Kim no longer had to ask if humanity was ready. They were. The launch of the Galactic Prometheus was never mentioned in public. No news bulletins, no parades, no heroic speeches from world leaders. It was just one more classified operation, buried under dozens of codenames and data obfuscations. But to the people who mattered, it was a turning point. It was proof. Humanity wasn't tricked anymore. When the Prometheus returned from its initial mission undetected, successful, and carrying raw materials from an asteroid belt 12 light-years away, Admiral Kim gathered her senior command in the underground war room beneath the Pacific. She didn't speak in metaphor. "This is war," she said plainly. "Not one of bullets or bombs yet, but of knowledge, of movement, of secrecy." The Council's mistake was thinking a cage could hold us. What they built was a crucible. And now we forge. From that day forward, the development of Earth's hidden network accelerated. Construction facilities were established beneath the moon's crust, shielded from orbital scan. Modular habitats, power cores, and stealth plating were assembled piece by piece, then moved through the Prometheus drive to distant systems. Every new site was built in silence, away from Council patrol paths. Some were hidden in asteroid fields, others beneath planetary oceans or within the radiation belts of dead worlds. Each one served a purpose. Mining, research, fabrication, logistics. No one colony knew the full scope of the plan. They didn't need to. Dr. Park, now heading the Department of Interstellar Engineering, worked relentlessly to improve the Prometheus drive. The first-generation system worked, but was unstable, bulky, and limited. It needed hours to charge and could only travel between pre-calculated anchor points. But Earth's engineers weren't bound by tradition. They were bound by necessity. Within 5 years, Park and his team produced a second-generation model. Smaller, faster, virtually undetectable. They called it the Whisper engine. It was fitted onto a new class of stealth vessels, sleek, matty black cruisers, with hulls that absorbed scans and distorted thermal signatures. Officially, they didn't exist. Unofficially, they were the hands of Earth's growing influence. Their job: chart the unknown, map safe routes, identify unclaimed systems, and if necessary, make first contact. But not every first contact was accidental. One of the Whisper-class vessels, HACEGs, discovered a pre-industrial alien civilization on a forested world orbiting a red dwarf. The inhabitants, a peaceful avian species called the Tainari, were in the late stages of developing steam-based industry. The crew observed quietly for months, but then the data came. A Council-registered mining ship en route. Standard protocol for the Council: extract resources, claim dominion, displace the locals if necessary. Admiral Kim authorized immediate intervention. No broadcasts. No broadcast. No diplomacy. The Aegis jammed the mining ship's systems, disabled its landing thrusters, and redirected it into deep space. No casualties, no trace, no proof. The Council would log it as equipment failure. But the Tainari would never know how close they came to being erased. It became Earth's unofficial policy: protect what the Council deemed disposed. Across multiple sectors, The human fleet began establishing silent colonies, fully self-sufficient outposts operating under complete communications blackout. They grew their own food, mined their own fuel, recycled every drop of waste, each one built on the assumption that no help would come, and each one improved on the last. After 10 years, there were 6 colonies. After 15, there were 18. Each connected by hidden jump relays, buried in interstellar dust clouds, or mounted on cometary bodies. The Council's surveillance tech wasn't built to detect things that weren't supposed to exist. And the humans had become very good at building exactly that. Still, Admiral Kim knew it couldn't last forever. During one high-level strategic session gathered around a 3-dimensional projection of known Council patrol routes, she addressed her advisors bluntly. "They'll find something eventually," she said. "A heat trail, a power surge, a whisper of movement in a system they thought abandoned, and when they do, they won't ask questions, they'll mobilize." Dr. Park, now older and slower, but no less brilliant, nodded in agreement. "So what do we do?" asked Colonel Rivera, head of off-world logistics. Kim leaned forward. "We get ahead of them." Thus was born Fist 3. Shadowfall-class cruisers, the newest fleet, carried prototype third-general drives and weapon systems designed not for war, but for prevention. Disruption pulses, scanner feedback loops, planetary cloaks that could mask energy emissions from orbit. They also carried Diplomat. Not the kind Earth once sent to beg for approval, but the kind who negotiated from strength. The first contact came with the Nara crystalline species denied Council membership for their inefficient reproduction rate. The humans didn't offer handouts. They offered trade, exchange, mutual protection, a place in something new. The Nara accepted within 2 weeks. Then came the gaseous Athari, the hive-minded Trell, the amphibious Macon. One by one, rigid species found their way to Earth's growing network not as subordinates, but as equals. The Shadow Confederation was never officially declared. It just was. By the 20th year, Earth's presence spanned over 20 light-years, 32 operating colonies, 17 confirmed species allies, a fleet of 76 stealth-capable vessels, thousands of personnel, all hidden, all coordinated. Every decision, every movement was measured. Because if the Council found them before they were ready, it would be over. But Kim was betting that fear made the Council slow, cautious, conservative. Humanity had never been any of those things. At a closed-door session beneath Olympus, Mons, one of Mars's now thriving underground cities, Kim addressed the Confederation's Provisional High Command. She stood tall, though her bones ached. Her once black hair now fully gray, but her presence hadn't dimmed, not in the slightest. "We were told we couldn't exist beyond our world," she began. "But here we are, not just surviving, thriving. And we've done it without war, without conquest, without demanding anyone bend the knee." She let the silence settle. When they exiled us, the Council feared what we might become. But what they created is worse for them, because we're no longer alone. Applause broke out across the chamber, not loud or theatrical, but sincere. Tired hands clapping in quiet defiance. The Shadow Confederation was still hidden, but it was ready. The HUV Defiant drifted in high orbit, cloaked in silence, far above a planet that didn't yet have a name on any star chart. To its inhabitants, it was home, lush forests, endless oceans, mountain ranges wrapped in clouds. Primitive atmospheric scans identified the species as Kieran's tall, slender bipeds with iridescent skin and a rapidly evolving industrial base. Electricity had only recently entered their cities. Their communication methods were still analog. The Kierans were innocent, unaware of the galaxy beyond. Captain Elise Lee stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the planet below. "It's beautiful," her first officer said quietly. Lee didn't reply. She was staring at something else, a massive angular silhouette breaking orbit from the far side of the planet. The Zoltar-class extractor was Council-built. 3 times the size of the Defiant, designed for high-volume atmospheric harvesting. It deployed terraforming equipment automatically, reshaping entire biospheres to match industrial requirements. Such vessels didn't knock. They didn't negotiate. They harvested, and if someone was in the way, they were treated as part of the debris. "Scan their deployment pattern," Lee ordered. Her science officer tapped at the console. "Atmospheric processors are warming. Mineral scanners active. They're deploying pre-configured terraformers projected impact. Complete atmospheric collapse within 3 weeks." "And the Kirans?" "Extinction level conditions within 12 days. No indication the Zaltar crew has even acknowledged their presence." Lee's jaw tightened. This wasn't the first time the Council had authorized the quiet erasure of a developing species. It was standard policy, expedient, clean, efficient, but this time someone was watching. She turned to her comms officer. "Open a secure channel to HV Swift and HEV Horizon. Tell them to form up on me, Delta formation. Shields active, weapons cold." Her crew froze. "Captain," her exo said carefully, "this is contact. This is exposure. Are we sure we're ready for this?" "No," Lee said honestly, "but I'd rather be exposed than complicit." The Defiant's cloaking field disengaged. Her dark hull caught the light as she moved into position between the Zaltar vessel and the planet. Swift and Horizon flanked her like wings. 3 human ships. Alone, challenging the full might of the Galactic Council. "Channel open," comms reported. Lee took a slow breath, then stepped forward. "This is Captain Elise Lee of the human starship Defiant," she said clearly. "The civilization below is under our protection. You will cease all operations and leave this system immediately." For several moments, silent. Then, the bridge screen blinked to life. A council face appeared, an insectoid species. Multiple eyes glinting like black pearls, mandibles twitching with irritation. "Unidentified vessels," the alien rasped, its voice filtered through a standard translator. "This system has been registered for authorized extraction. Your interference is unlawful. You are ordered to withdraw or be destroyed." Lee didn't flinch. This planet harbors a developing sentient species. Terraforming will result in their extinction. That is unacceptable. We will not stand down. The Zaltar commander tilted its head. "Humans," it said at last, as recognition hit, "you are quarantined. This presence is a violation of Council decree. We stopped accepting the Council's judgment a long time ago," Lee said. "You'll leave this planet, or we'll make you." The alien bristled, eyes narrowing. "You threaten a superior vessel? Your technology is outdated. Your species is a danger to itself." "Maybe," Lee admitted, "but we're still here. And we didn't come alone." The Zaltar commander gave a sharp command off-screen. A second later, a high-energy beam lanced from the extractor ship, striking Defiant's shields dead center. "Shields at 87%, her tactical officer reported. "Minimal internal damage. Deck 4 took a jolt." Lee nodded. "Return fire. Disable only." The Defiant's twin rail emitters hummed, sending precision pulses straight into the Zaltar's weapons matrix and propulsion array. Within seconds, their systems began to fail. Emergency power flickered. The massive vessel listed slowly, engines offline. "Secondary ships incoming," Swift's captain reported. 2 light escorts emerging from the moon's shadow. Lee glanced at her tactical map. "Engage if necessary. Non-lethal only." What followed was not a firefight, it was a message. 3 human vessels danced around 5 Council-built ships with ruthless efficiency. No wasted movement, no unnecessary shots. One by one, the Council ships were disabled, left intact but stranded alive, but humbled. Lee opened the channel again. The Zaltar commander was visibly shaken, posture rigid with fear. "What are you?" it demanded. "We're what your Council forced us to become," Lee said. "You'll be given enough power to limp home. And you'll take a message with you," she leaned forward. "The Quran system is now under human protection. So are 7 other pre-industrial civilizations. If the Council or its contractors interfere with any of them again, we'll respond in kind. No warnings next time. The aliens stared, mandibles clicking nervously. The Council will not tolerate this rebellion. Then they better get used to disappointment. The Zalter ships turned slowly and jumped out of the system. Silence returned to the bridge of the Defiant. Lee exhaled slowly. Her exo broke the silence. We've crossed the line. No, Lee said, looking down at the blue-green world below. The line crossed us. We just finally stepped over it. The human ships didn't remain. A cloaked monitoring station was established in a nearby asteroid belt. Automated defense satellites were deployed. The Karens would continue their development, never knowing they had nearly been erased, and never knowing someone had stood between them and extinction. As Defiant prepared for departure, Lee composed her report to command. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. 5 Council vessels disabled. 0 human casualties. 1 protected species. But the implications were massive. Humanity's shadow empire was no longer a secret, not entirely. The Council had seen them now, seen what the humans had become after 50 years of exile, and more importantly, seen what they were willing to do. Lee stared at the stars as her ship accelerated toward deep space. Set course for Outpost Sentinel, she ordered. Maximum speed. The stars blurred past the hull. The Karen world shrank in the rear display, a glowing blue marble in the void. She whispered to no one in particular, "The exile ends today." The Council's emergency session began in chaos. For a body that prided itself on order and protocol, the sheer volume of overlapping transmissions, shouted objections, and stunned disbelief was unprecedented. Inside the Grand Assembly Chamber, an architectural marvel that had once inspired awe, delegates now shouted over one another, their carefully practiced neutrality breaking into visible panic. At the center of the uproar was a single classified report. Humans had been detected outside their solar system, far beyond the boundaries of their imposed quarantine. Operating hyperspace-capable ships, disabling Council vessels, interfering with Council-sanctioned extraction missions. Not in theory, in fact, documented. How is this possible? Bellowed the Daxian counselor, forearms gesturing with uncharacteristic disorder. The quarantine was absolute. We sealed their system, cut them off from faster-than-light travel, restricted technological advancement, closed all trade routes. They were monitored continuously, hissed the Krell delegate. Thousands of observation points, fail-safes embedded in automated patrol systems. And yet, added the Mithrin envoy coolly, its crystalline form pulsing with agitation, 5 of our ships were disabled within minutes. With tactics we couldn't predict, with weapons we didn't recognize, their stealth signatures were non-existent. It's as if they designed their systems purely to defy our detection model. The screen at the center of the chamber displayed high-resolution images captured by a damaged Salter support vessel before its blackout. 3 human ships, triangular in shape, sleek, matte black hulls that seemed to drink in light. Each one bore no insignia, no registry, no formal broadcast codes. And yet their movement, their coordination, their precision, it was unmistakable. They weren't scavengers. They were trained, ready, organized. In the shadows of the chamber, a cloaked figure observed quietly. Not a council delegate, but something older, one of the Ravi. A species that no longer held a seat but operated the largest independent information network in known space. Their agent had been tasked with tracking rumors, whispers that humanity's exile had failed. Now, those rumors were fact. 6 days later, that same Ravi agent stood before a woman who no longer needed introduction. Admiral Minute Kim, now well over 100 years old, was no longer just Earth's military commander. She was the unifying force behind something far larger. Her hair was silver, her posture slower, but her presence had only sharpened. She reviewed the intelligence without speaking, then finally looked up at the agent. "So," she said with quiet satisfaction, They're afraid. Yes, the agent confirmed. They're mobilizing. Recon patrols, survey fleets, deep space listening arrays. But your cloaking systems are holding. They've passed within a light year of your Proxima colony 3 times. Detected nothing. Kim nodded. Payment will be transferred. Tell your speaker the offer still stands. When the time comes. The Ravi bowed and left without another word. Kim turned to her aide. It's time. The following week, beneath the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, Earth's parliament met in full session. But this was no longer a strictly human gathering. Seated beside the representatives of Earth's former nations were delegates from 23 non-council species, some humanoid, others barely recognizable by human standards. The Nar, living crystals who refracted sound instead of speaking. The Athari, contained in pressurized mobility tanks filled with swirling violet gas. The Trell, hive minds, represented by 5 synchronized bodies with shared consciousness. The room buzzed with polyphonic communication translated in real time by adaptive neural relays. And then Admiral Kim entered. Her steps were deliberate. Every eye turned toward her. Silence followed. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice amplified across the underground hall. 50 years ago, the Galactic Council judged humanity unfit for interstellar society. They exiled us to our solar system, believing we would wither in isolation. A pause. They were wrong. The chamber stirred with murmurs of approval. "We didn't die," she continued. "We evolved. We built, and in the shadows we found others who had been cast aside. Species denied membership for reasons that had nothing to do with merit and everything to do with conformity." She gestured toward the delegates beside her. The Nar were rejected because their reproduction cycle was inefficient. The Trell because their hive mind didn't fit council models of individual sovereignty. The Athari because their gaseous form was logistically inconvenient. And yet all of you have something in common: potential, intelligence, integrity, and most importantly, the will to shape your own future. A crystalline hum rose from the Nar representative. The translator activated. "When humans found us, they didn't demand allegiance," it said. "They asked what we needed, and they listened. Why would we not trust them?" Similar testimonies followed from species across dozens of systems. Each one told a version of the same story: rejected by the Council, welcomed by Earth. Kim raised her hand again. "The Council now knows we exist. They know about our technology, but they don't yet understand the truth. Not just about Earth, but about all of us." She paused. "They think we're just another threat, but what we are is a foundation. Something new. Something better." The vote to reveal the Shadow Confederation's full scope passed unanimously. Within days, diplomatic packages were prepared. Stealth ships were dispatched to systems along the Council's border. Carefully selected colonies opened their communications channel. And when the Council's diplomatic cruiser finally entered Seoul, expecting a stagnant, isolated civilization, it instead found something unrecognizable. Mars, terraformed. Green, thriving. The asteroid belt, lined with automated shipyards. Jupiter's moons, cities beneath domes, pulsating with life and commerce. They weren't brought to Earth. They were taken to Callisto Station, the capital of the Confederation. There, Kim waited, flanked by delegates from 5 allied species. The Mithran envoy pulsed anxiously in its containment vessel. "This is a violation of the highest order," it declared. "Your kind was judged unfit. This is an act of defiance." "Not defiance," Kim corrected. "Reality. The exile failed because isolation doesn't work on humans. It only motivates us." The Council diplomats looked around at ships bearing non-human designs flying side by side with human vessels, at unified command centers staffed by multi-species personnel, at technologies they didn't understand. "This is a confederation," said Kim. 50 worlds, 42 systems, dozens more aligned, not ruled, but partnered, by choice. The diplomats stared. "Impossible," one whispered. "You've always looked for the same signals," Kim said. "The same footprints. We didn't follow your path. We made our own." The Mithrin tried one last objection. "This structure threatens galactic stability." "Only the kind of stability that exists by suppressing difference," Kim replied. "We're not asking for permission. We're offering cooperation, trade, defense, mutual respects." She leaned in. "The choice is yours." As the diplomats were escorted back to their shuttle, Kim returned to the observation deck. One of her aides approached quietly. "Do you think they'll accept our terms?" "Eventually," Kim said. "They pride themselves on logic. And logic will tell them the truth. They can't stop us. Not anymore." The Confederation wasn't in hiding now. It had stepped into the light. The orbital station hung in the silence of space like a silver lotus in bloom. Its central spire rose 3 kilometers high, flanked by 6 vast petals, curved structural arms, each over 30 kilometers from edge to edge. From above, the whole thing resembled a blossom turned toward the stars. But this wasn't art. It was engineering. A monument built not for display, but for declaration. It was called Concord Station. It was the capital of the Shadow Confederation. And on this day, it would host the most important event in human history since the Council exiled Earth. The Centennial Concord, the 100-year anniversary of the quarantine, and the formal ratification of a new galactic order. Chancellor Mira Sun stood at the viewing window of her private suite. From here, she could see the hyperspace corridor flare one after another, vessels emerging into real space with shimmering trails of folded gravity, each one a signature, each one a message. "They're coming," she thought, "all of them. The Confederation's allies, former council members, independent empires, and perhaps, most surprisingly, the Galactic Council itself." "Confirmed arrival," said her aide, a crystalline nair named Liren. The Mithrin diplomatic cruiser just exited hyperspace. Council insignia verified. They actually came. "They didn't have a choice," Sun said, turning from the window. "Trade binds tighter than politics. And fear sharpens interest." Now 72, Sun carried herself with the straight-backed posture of someone who had spent her youth in uniform. Her grandmother had served under Admiral Kim during the early expansion era. Mira had grown up in the shadow of those stories of secrecy, sacrifice, and survival. But this was something else. This was legacy. The assembly hall was carved into the heart of the station, an amphitheater that could seat representatives from over 200 worlds. No two looked alike. Some were insectoid, others crystalline or liquid-based, some used environment suits. Some didn't breathe at all. The chamber had been designed to accommodate all of them. At its center stood a replica of the original council platform, the one where humanity had once been condemned. It had been deliberately reconstructed here, a silent reminder of how far things had changed. As Chancellor Sun entered the hall, the delegates rose not out of formality, but out of genuine respect. The noise quieted, the lights dimmed, and Sun stepped into the circle of history. 100 years ago today, she began, her voice clear, the Galactic Council judged humanity unfit for the stars. Too aggressive, too competitive, too chaotic. She let the silence stretch, her gaze sweeping the room. They exiled us, caged us, believed that isolation would break. She paused again. They were wrong. A lame murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Instead of breaking, we adapted. We learned, and we found other species like ours, denied membership, denied dignity, denied agency. Together, we built something the Council never imagined. An alliance not of hierarchy but of cooperation. Behind her, the holoscreen shifted. Images filled the air, early human colonies carved into asteroids. The first joint research station on Mars, the rescue of the Korans, the expansion of the silent colony. Then later, the Nar joining the Confederation, the Athari, the Trell, the Vex, the battles fought quietly, and the ones that weren't. We created something more than survival, Sun continued. We created a path forward, one where no species is forced to fit a single mold, where diversity isn't just tolerated but treated as strength. The crowd erupted in a mixture of applause, tonal pulses, and synchronized movement, each species expressing support in their own way. A troll speaker took the platform next. 5 synchronized bodies moved as one, their voice translated into an eerie but harmonious cadence. When Council explorers found our world, they studied us like insects, it said. They found our hive mind inefficient, non-individual, incompatible, so they left. When humans found us, they asked what we needed. And they stayed. The chamber resonated with quiet agreement. One by one, representatives shared similar accounts. The Marin, whose rapid generational turnover had been deemed culturally unstable. The Vex, whose silicon-based biology didn't align with Council medical standard. The Yothi, whose method of memory transfer was mistaken for mind control. Each had been rejected. Each had been welcomed by the Confederation. And then, for the first time in a century, a voice from the Council. A Darien representative, his people had once called humans a deviant evolutionary path. Now, he stood alone on the central platform, a formal robe draped across one shoulder. The Council acknowledges, he began, that its evaluation of humanity was incomplete. The words hung heavy in the air. What was once perceived as aggression has shown itself, in many cases, to be protective resilient. What was seen as chaotic competition has resulted in innovation. He gestured to the chamber. This confederation has achieved in 1 century what the Council has struggled to do in 20 millennia. True integration of diverse evolutionary paths. Without coercion, without conformity. We are reassessing. There was no applause, but there was silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The ceremony moved toward its climax. At a long central table, chiseled from a mix of human-forged alloys and naturally grown crystal, a series of agreements were signed by human hands, insectoid limbs, appendages made of light, and even by proxy AI. Expanded trade accords, mutual defense pact, shared scientific database. As the signatures were completed, Sun raised her glass, a human tradition now adopted across Confederation space. We toast not to our power, she said, but to our potential. The exile they imposed gave us the fire, but this alliance gave us the shape. Behind her, the station adjusted orbit. Slowly, Earth came into view, blue and alive. Around it, hundreds of ships drifted in perfect formation, not just human, Confederation, Council, neutral states. A choreographed light display began, streams of radiant energy connecting vessels like a web of starlight. A symbol of connection across origin and biology. Sun stepped back as the delegates looked on in silent wonder. "A century ago," she said quietly, "we were judged unworthy of the stars." She turned, facing Earth and the gathered fleet. "Today, we help shape how they are shared." Later that night, long after the formalities had ended, Sun stood once more at her observation deck. Liren entered, datapad in hand. "Message from Long Range Exploration Division," the NAR said. "Confirm contact beyond Sagittarius Arm. Artificial signal. Not Council, not Confederation. Unknown architecture." Sun smiled faintly. "So there's still more out there?" "Yes, Chancellor. And the Council has requested an emergency session to address it." They seemed concerned. "Of course they are," she replied. "The unknown always scared them." She turned back to the stars. "Schedule the meeting and prepare a proposal. Joint Confederation Council contact mission." Liren nodded and left. Alone now, Sun watched the stars stretch out like silver dust. The exile, once a sentence, had become the foundation of something far greater. Not just survival, not survival, not even revenge. The stars beyond the station shimmered like distant embers, each one ancient, indifferent, and waiting. Chancellor Mira's son stood alone on the private deck of Concord Station, wrapped in silence that felt deeper than space. The ceremonies were over, the diplomats gone, the final agreements signed, and yet the air still vibrated with the weight of what had just been witnessed, a species once exiled, now elevated. A civilization that had not only survived its sentence but reshaped the map around it. Sun stared out at Earth, spinning slowly beneath the station, the blue of the oceans, the soft swirl of clouds, the lights of cities built by the descendants of rebels, survivors, dreamers. She spoke softly, though no one was around to hear her. "You tried to break us," she said. "You locked us in our system like dangerous animals, and in doing so, you gave us everything we needed." There was a quiet chime. Her aide entered Lyran, ever efficient. "We've confirmed the Pathfinder probe signal again," he said, tone precise but reverent. "It's repeating. Structured mathematics, variable encoding, definitely artificial, not human, not council." Sun looked at him. "How far beyond the Sagittarius arm?" "Roughly 42,000 light-years from current Confederation boundaries." She let the distance settle into her thoughts. Farther than any known species had traveled. Farther than Earth had even dreamed of during the days of its exile. And yet, it was just another beginning. "We're not alone," she said, almost to herself. "No, Chancellor. We never were." Sun turned back to the window. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then, "The Council?" "Requesting an emergency joint session," Lyran replied. "They're calling it a preemptive cooperative response initiative." Sun raised an eyebrow. "Which means?" "They're scared." Sun smiled just slightly. "Good," Lyran tilted his head. "Shall I draft a response?" "No," Sun said. "I'll do it myself. And while I'm at it, have the Confederation Science Director prepare a proposal joint mission, shared command, no hierarchy, no veto power." She exhaled. "If we're going to meet whatever's out there, we'll do it as what we are not, what they tried to make us." Lyran nodded and left the room. Alone again, Sun let her thoughts drift. The story of Earth had never been about conformity. It had been about tension between destruction and discovery, survival and ambition. The Council had seen the worst of humanity's past and assumed it would dictate the future. But what they hadn't seen was what came after collapse, what emerged when a species was forced to confront itself and rebuild from the ashes without the safety net of external validation. The exile had done more than isolate humanity. It had united it. The first years had been painful. Old governments didn't dissolve overnight. Military powers resisted centralization. Cultures clashed, trust broke, then reformed in places no one expected. But necessity is a patient teacher. And fear is a powerful glue. With the stars stolen from them, humanity had turned inward, not into self-destruction, but into self-discovery. All the energy once spent on war and rivalry had been redirected into survival. Every failure had become a lesson. Every dead end, a blueprint. And then the Whisper Drives came, and the Prometheus Initiative, and Operation Exodus, and the colonies, and finally the Alliance. Species rejected by the Council had found common cause with Earth, not because they shared culture, but because they shared exclusion. The Shadow Confederation had never been about dominance. It had been about choice. About carving a space for those the old order had discarded. Now that confederation stretched across hundreds of worlds, across dozens of species, across languages, anatomies, and beliefs. And still, Earth remained its heart. Not because it demanded to be, but because it had proven itself worthy. Sun's eyes drifted to the great arc of ships in orbit, some human, others distinctly alien. And yet they flew in formation, shared power grids, coordinated defenses, traded personnel, lived together, fought together. It hadn't always been easy. Misunderstandings still happened. Not every system ran smoothly. But it worked. It endured. And now, something beyond all of them had spoken. Not loudly, not violently. Just a signal, just a door, waiting to be opened. Sun tapped the embedded console at her side. The transparent wall adjusted to display archival footage Admiral Kim, back when her hair was still black and her voice rang like steel through the halls of the underground command center. "They should destroy us," Kim had said, standing before a room of grim military and scientific leaders. "The air welcomed us, but exile. That was the worst mistake they could have made, because it gave us time to unite, time to grow, time to become the thing they fear." Sun watched the footage for a while longer, then closed it. She'd never met Kim personally, but her presence lingered in every decision the Confederation made. Her legacy wasn't war, it was preparation, resilience, vision. A soft chime broke her thoughts. An incoming message. Private channel. Source, Outpost Farwatch. She accepted. The face of Captain Juno Vidal appeared, commander of one of the long-range stealth cruisers positioned along the Confederation's deep frontier. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed tension. "Chancellor," Vidal said, "we've received an encoded transmission from Pathfinder 1. It's not just a beacon now, it's coordinates and a time. 300 standard hours from now." Sun felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of coordinates?" "Three-dimensional spatial marker with a gravitational anchor point. Looks like an artificial construct. Big." "Could be a trap," Sun said. "Could be a door," Vidal countered. Sun nodded. "Prepare a task force. Mixed crews. 3 science vessels. 2 escort class. 1 diplomatic transport. Orders? Go to the edge," Sun said. "But don't cross until I authorize." "Yes, Chancellor." The screen blinked off. Sun stared at the stars once more. 100 years ago, humanity had been dragged before a tribunal and told it wasn't worthy of the stars. And maybe, back then, that had been true. But they hadn't stayed that way. Exile had lit a fire. Rejection had forged focus. Isolation had cultivated innovation. And now, Earth stood not as a rogue actor, but as a builder of bridges between species, between cultures, and perhaps soon, between galaxies. "Thank you," she whispered softly, to ghosts long gone, "for locking us in." Her fingers brushed against the glass. Below her, Earth turned silently unaware. Above, the galaxy waited, and beyond, something else. She turned from the stars and began to write the first line of the Confederation's next chapter.